called Roadmap to Fault-Tolerant Quantum Computation Using Topological Qubit Arrays.
Oh, yeah.
From Microsoft Quantum
Package
Compute.
title.
It's their plan or roadmap for building reliable quantum computers. But get this.
Okay.
They want to use a totally different type of qubit called a tetron
Interesting.
instead of the usual suspects that we hear about, like the transmon or the trapped ion.
Yeah.
These tetrons are based on some really mind-bending physics.
Absolutely.
So are you ready to get a little quantum weird with this one?
Oh, I'm always ready for quantum weirdness. This is what I live for.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is really where it gets interesting because the paper is focused on these tetrons, which leverage something called Majorana zero modes to store information.
Mm-hmm.
It's complex, but the paper does a really good job of laying out a step-by-step plan, starting small and scaling up.
Okay.
Basically, it's like they're setting out to prove that this new approach could be the future of quantum computing.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then.
Sure.
What exactly is a tetron?
Right.
It's not like those blocks that fall down in Tetris, is it?
Not quite, no.
Okay.
Although the name is pretty edgy.
Yeah, it is.
So imagine two parallel superconducting wires, and at each end of these wires, you have these special points.
Okay.
They're called Majorana zero modes, or MZMs
Yeah.
for short.
Okay.
Now, these MZMs are where it's really bizarre. They both have like half an electron.
Half an electron.
Yeah, it's like
Ooh.
you slice an electron in half, and somehow it still works.
Yeah, that's some wild quantum stuff right there.
Oh, yeah. It's deep down the rabbit hole of quantum mechanics. And it's the way these MZMs interact that determines the qubits information.
So how do you actually use a tetron to do computations? Is it like those other qubits where you're like fiddling with lasers and microwaves and stuff?
So that's what's so different about this approach.
Okay.
Instead of directly manipulating the tetron with external fields, they rely on measuring its state
Okay.
to perform computations.
Interesting.
So it's a much more digital approach.
Okay.
And that actually has some big advantages when it comes to error handling.
So less fiddling, more observing.
You got it.
Okay.
And by relying on measurement, they can potentially avoid a lot of the issues that plague other qubit types, making the system inherently more robust.
So that sounds promising, especially since errors are a huge deal in quantum computing.
Yeah, a huge deal.
Yeah.
The paper even goes as far as to compare this to the classic Stern-Gerlach experiment in physics.
Oh, Stern-Gerlach, the one where you shoot particles through a magnetic field?
Exactly that one.
Okay, but instead of measuring electron spins, they're measuring those exotic Majorana particles.
Exactly. It's a clever way to confirm that these tetrons actually exhibit the quantum properties that are needed for computation. And you think of it as like a quantum test drive, making sure that the tetron actually lives up to its potential.
Okay, so they build a single tetron, they take it for a spin, and then what?
All right, so stage 2.
Okay.
This is where they add another tetron, and they aim to demonstrate entanglement.
Okay.
That spooky quantum connection where two particles are linked no matter how far apart they are.
Right.
But they don't stop there.
Okay.
They also want to show that they can perform operations between those entangled tetrons. And this is where that non-abelian nature of MZMs that you mentioned earlier really comes into play.
Hold on, non-abelian.
Yeah.
That sounds like some serious physics jargon.
It is.
What makes it so special for quantum computing?
Yeah, so it's a bit complicated.
Okay.
But essentially what it means is that the order in which you perform operations on these MZMs actually matters.
Okay.
And this is a unique property that allows for something called braiding.
Okay.
Which is a key to executing certain types of quantum computations.
Uh-huh.
Think of it like a carefully choreographed dance between those Majorana particles,
Okay.
all controlled by making specific measurements.
So it's not just that they're entangled, it's the way that they're entangled that unlocks these new possibilities?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's just the beginning.
Uh-huh.
The roadmap goes on to explore even more ambitious demonstrations,
Okay.
really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with these tetrons.
Okay, things are getting really interesting. We've gone from half electrons to spooky entanglement, and now this braiding dance.
Yeah, it's a whole quantum party over here.
So what's next on this quantum adventure? What's stage 3 all about?
Stage 3 is all about error handling.
Okay.
They scale up to an 8-tetron device.
Okay.
And they use a specific error detection code called the ladder code.
Okay.
Think of it as a safety net for their quantum calculations.
Even with these supposedly robust tetrons, errors are still a concern.
Oh, absolutely no system is perfect.
Okay.
But what's really cool about stage 3 is that they directly compare doing operations on individual tetrons versus doing operations on the whole encoded system.
Okay.
So this head-to-head comparison is how they aim to prove that their concept is actually worth pursuing. It's like saying, look, our approach really does make a difference when it comes to fighting those pesky errors.
Yeah, I like how they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Exactly.
They're not just claiming it, they're trying to actually show that it works.
Yeah, they're backing it up.
But what about the C picture then?
Okay.
Stage 4 has to be about putting all of this together, right?
You're catching on quickly.
Hopefully.
Stage 4 is where it all comes together.
Okay.
They're aiming for what they call scalable quantum error correction, using a massive array of tetrons to run powerful error-correcting codes.
Wow.
Imagine 2 large patches of tetrons, each encoding a logical qubit,
Okay.
designed to be stitched together to perform complex computations. This is their ultimate vision, a fault-tolerant quantum computer built on these bizarre, yet potentially revolutionary tetrons.
Wow, so we've gone from single tetrons to massive arrays encoding logical qubits. It sounds like Microsoft is really betting big on this approach.
They are all in on this.
But do they think it'll actually work?
Well,
what are some of the potential advantages they highlight?
Well, they lay out some pretty compelling arguments in the roadmap.
Okay.
The big one is scalability.
Okay.
Remember, tetrons are incredibly tiny.
Right.
So you could potentially pack millions onto a single chip. That's a huge advantage when it comes to building large, powerful quantum computers.
Right.
Plus, operations with tetrons can happen on incredibly fast timescales.
Okay.
Meaning faster computations.
So we're talking small, fast, and potentially very reliable.
That's the goal.
That's a pretty enticing combination.
It is. It's very appealing.
But I'm guessing there are some challenges ahead as well.
Oh, of course.
Building a quantum computer, even with these special tetrons, can't be easy.
Yeah, you're right, and we'll dive into some of those challenges next.
Okay.
This roadmap isn't just about dreams.
Right.
It's about tackling the very real hurdles that stand between us and a future powered by reliable quantum computation.
All right, so stay tuned. We're going to get into those challenges right after the break.
Okay, so we've established that Microsoft is going all in on these tetrons.
Yeah.
But how do they actually plan to wrangle these half-electron wonders and get them to do computations?
Right.
The paper mentions some pretty serious-sounding stuff, like interferometric loops and quantum capacitance.
Yeah.
Is this where we need a physics degree to follow along?
No. You don't need a PhD to understand the basics.
Okay.
Remember, computation with tetrons relies on measurement.
Right.
Those interferometric loops are essentially clever circuits designed to indirectly measure the state of the tetrons.
Okay, so walk me through it. How do they actually measure something as elusive as a Majorana zero mode?
So imagine this. They create a tiny loop with a section that's sensitive to the presence of those MZMs.
Okay.
By carefully controlling the flow of electrons in this loop, they can detect a shift in energy caused by those elusive Majorana particles.
Okay.
It's like listening for the subtle hum of the tetron, you know?
Yeah. Revealing its secrets through these tiny energy shifts.
So it's like an energy fingerprint.
Yeah.
Each state of the tetron creates a unique energy signature that they can measure.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they measure this energy shift by looking at something called the quantum capacitance of the device.
Okay.
It's a bit technical, but the key takeaway is that they can use standard microwave techniques to pick up these subtle changes in capacitance, giving them a way to read the state of the tetron.
That's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
They're not just building these exotic tetrons, they're also coming up with really clever ways to measure and control them using existing technology.
Yeah, they're building on what we already have.
But even with these fancy techniques, I imagine errors are still a concern.
Of course, even the most carefully crafted quantum system can't escape the realities of noise and imperfections.
Yeah, the universe tends to be messy.
The paper does a good job of outlining the different types of errors they might encounter and how they plan to tackle them head on.
All right, let's talk about those errors then.
Okay.
What kind of things can go wrong in this quantum dance?
So they break it down into 2 main categories.
Okay.
Classical errors and quantum errors.
Okay.
Think of classical errors like those annoying bit flips in regular computers where the information itself gets corrupted.
Yeah, like a 0 turns into a 1.
Exactly.
Okay.
Quantum errors, on the other hand, are a bit more subtle.
Okay.
They actually affect the delicate quantum state of those MZMs, potentially disrupting the entire computation.
So classical errors are like a misread signal, and quantum others are like a cosmic ray messing up the hardware itself?
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Okay.
So the paper highlights that the unique properties of those MZMs actually provide some inherent protection against many of these errors. Their topological nature makes them less susceptible to disturbances.
Okay.
Which is a huge plus.
Yeah, less sensitive to the outside world.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it's not a foolproof solution.
Right.
And they still need to carefully consider various sources of errors and how to mitigate them.
So it's like they're building this incredible quantum fortress, but there are still some sneaky ways for errors to slip in.
Yeah, there are always cracks in the armor.
Okay.
One of the key things they emphasize is minimizing those unwanted interactions between different parts of the tetron,
Okay.
as well as protecting it from external noise.
Uh-huh.
Remember those cutter-based controls we mentioned earlier?
Oh, right. Those are like tiny switches that can isolate different parts of the tetron.
Exactly. They play a crucial role here.
Okay.
By selectively connecting and disconnecting different parts of the tetron, they can essentially choreograph the interactions between the MZMs, protecting them from unwanted disturbances and ensuring that only the intended operations take place.
So it's all about creating this carefully controlled environment.
It is. It's all about
for the computation to happen.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's like a delicate ballet of quantum particles, all orchestrated by these carefully timed pulses and controls.
It's amazing how they're combining these mind-bending quantum concepts.
I know, it's really fascinating.
With these practical engineering solutions.
Right.
But remember, this is a roadmap, a plan for the future.
Yeah?
What are the actual steps they lay out to reach their goal of fault-tolerant quantum computation?
Well, they start by focusing on mastering those measurement-based braiding transformations we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Remember, braiding those MZMs is how they achieve those essential Clifford operations, the building blocks of quantum algorithms.
Right. Braiding is like their quantum programming language.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is that they can achieve this braiding without physically moving the MZMs around.
Okay.
They do it all through cleverly designed measurement sequences, using an auxiliary qubit as a helper.
Okay, so they're not physically manipulating the tetrons, but instead using measurements to orchestrate their interactions.
It's like they're conducting a quantum symphony.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And of course, being a symphony, there are bound to be a few missed notes.
Right.
That's where those Pauli corrections come in.
Ah, yes, the quantum equivalent of hitting the undo button.
Precisely because the measurement outcomes in the quantum world are probabilistic.
Right.
There's always a chance of getting a result that flows off the computation.
Yeah, that randomness is always there.
It is. It's inherent to the quantum world. And these Pauli corrections are essentially small adjustments they can make to compensate for those random fluctuations and keep the computation on track.
So it's like having a quantum autocorrect feature built into their system.
Yeah, it's like spell check for qubits.
Okay, but they're not stopping at just 2 tetrons, right?
Yep.
Where do they go from there on this roadmap?
You're right. They're constantly pushing the boundaries. The next step is build a specialized 2-qubit device, specifically designed to showcase those braiding transformations.
Okay.
This new device incorporates some clever design choices, like replacing a long quantum dot with what they call a coherent link, which helps improve the stability of those precious MZMs.
So they're not just throwing tetrons together, they're really carefully considering how to connect them and optimize their performance.
Absolutely. They're thinking about everything, from the materials they use to the way they control the flow of electrons. But they also acknowledge that 2-qubit operations introduce new complexities.
Right.
Especially the possibility of what they call correlated errors.
Okay.
Where both qubits get messed up simultaneously.
Oh, that sounds like a real headache.
It can be. But they're not backing down from the challenge they propose, using something called heralding measurements. To detect and track those correlated errors. Essentially keeping a watchful eye on those quantum dancers. To make sure they don't trip over each other.
So even as the system gets more complex,
Yeah.
they're finding new ways to maintain control and keep those errors in check.
Exactly. It's all about staying one step ahead of those quantum gremlins.
Okay, but I'm sensing another but come in.
You know me too well.
Yeah.
The real test comes when they scale up to an 8-qubit device.
Okay.
Which is their next big milestone.
8 qubits, now we're talking, but why the jump to 8?
Yeah.
What's so special about that number?
Well, it allows them to implement a more sophisticated error correction code called the ladder code.
Okay.
Specifically designed to tackle those tricky 2-qubit errors we discussed. This is where they can really demonstrate the power of encoding information across multiple tetrons. Creating a logical qubit that's much more resilient than any individual tetron could be on its own.
So it's like forming a quantum shield wall with each tetron protecting its neighbors.
That's a great way to visualize it, yeah. And what's really exciting is that they're not just theorizing about this. They've actually run detailed simulations showing that this approach can significantly improve the reliability of their quantum computations. even under realistic experimental conditions.
That's really impressive how they're weaving together this cutting-edge physics with clever engineering to create this intricate quantum tapestry.
It's a beautiful blend of theory and practice.
But where does this roadmap ultimately lead?
Right.
What's their grand vision for the future of quantum computing? Okay, so we've journeyed through this quantum realm.
We have.
Explored these mind-bending tetrons.
Absolutely.
And even learned how to braid half electrons.
It's been a wild ride.
It has been a wild ride, but this roadmap isn't just about building a cool new computer.
Right.
It's about unlocking possibilities we can barely even imagine.
It really is.
So what's the big payoff?
Yeah.
How might this technology actually change the world?
That's the truly exciting part. The paper hints at applications that go way beyond just faster calculations.
Okay.
They specifically mention fields like medicine and material science,
Mm-hmm.
where reliable quantum computation could revolutionize everything.
Okay, so paint me a picture. What does a quantum-powered future look like in those areas?
So imagine a world where we can design drugs and therapies with pinpoint accuracy,
Uh-huh.
targeting diseases at the molecular level.
Okay.
Or think about materials with properties we haven't even dreamt of.
Okay.
Lighter, stronger, more efficient.
Uh-huh.
All thanks to our ability to simulate and understand matter at a profoundly deeper level.
It's like upgrading from a magnifying glass to like a super-powered microscope, suddenly seeing the universe in a whole new light.
Exactly. It's like opening up a whole new dimension of understanding.
But let's be real, this roadmap is incredibly ambitious.
It is.
What are some of the hurdles that they'll need to clear to make this vision a reality?
Yeah, you're right. It's not going to be a walk in the park.
No.
One of the biggest challenges is simply the sheer complexity of building these devices.
Okay.
We're talking about manipulating matter at the atomic scale,
Uh-huh.
controlling those elusive Majorana particles with exquisite precision.
It's like trying to build a house of cards in a hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
But instead of cards, you're using quantum particles that can vanish or change at any moment.
That's a spot-on analogy. And beyond those technical hurdles,
Yeah.
there are still fundamental physics questions that need answers.
Okay.
Remember, this whole approach hinges on the assumption that those Majorana zero modes actually exist
Right.
and behave as predicted.
Yeah.
While there's been promising evidence,
Uh-huh.
it's still an area of active research.
So there's a chance this whole roadmap is leading to a dead end.
Well,
Betting big on something that might not even exist.
it's a calculated risk, but that's often how breakthroughs happen.
True.
They're pushing the boundaries of what we know,
Right.
and sometimes you have to venture into uncharted territory
Uh-huh.
to discover something truly groundbreaking.
Yeah, I admire their boldness, but even if those Majorana particles cooperate,
Yeah,
scaling up from 8 tetrons to millions just sounds like a monumental task.
absolutely. Scalability is always a challenge, but in the quantum world, it's exponentially harder.
Right.
It's not just about making more tetrons, it's about developing entirely new fabrication techniques,
Uh-huh.
control systems,
Yeah.
and error correction strategies that can handle that level of complexity.
So it's not just about building a bigger quantum computer.
Right.
It's about reinventing the entire process along the way.
It is. It's a whole new paradigm.
What about the cost?
Oh, yeah.
This kind of cutting-edge research can't be cheap.
You're right. And the paper acknowledges that cost will be a factor.
Okay.
Building and maintaining these systems requires specialized equipment, expertise, and a whole lot of resources.
Uh-huh.
It's a significant investment, but one they believe is justified,
Right.
given the potential impact.
Yeah, it's a gamble, but the potential payoff is enormous if they succeed. We're talking about a paradigm shift, not just in computing, but in our understanding of the world itself.
I completely agree. Reading this roadmap, you can sense their excitement and their determination.
Yeah.
They've carefully considered the challenges, laid out a concrete plan,
Right.
and seem genuinely convinced that this Tetron-based approach is the key to unlocking the true power of quantum computation.
It's inspiring, really. They're not just dreaming big.
Yeah.
They're backing it up with rigorous science and a clear vision of the future. It makes you wonder what other breakthroughs might be just around the corner.
It's an exciting time to be following the quantum computing journey, that's for sure.
Yeah.
This roadmap provides a glimpse into a future that, while still uncertain,
Uh-huh.
is filled with incredible possibilities.
It does, and it leaves me with a sense of optimism. Despite all the challenges, the potential benefits are too great to ignore.
I agree.
Who knows, maybe in a few years we'll be back here revisiting this roadmap, marveling at how far they've come and what amazing things they've achieved.
I would love to have that conversation.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our depth dive into Microsoft's roadmap for fault-tolerant quantum computing.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a wild ride.
It has.
And I'm sure we'll have much more to discuss as this field continues to evolve.
Absolutely. There's always something new happening in the quantum world.
Until next time, keep those quantum questions
And
coming.
keep exploring.